Recording in progress.
All right, welcome everybody. It's 6 o'clock, February 4th, 2005. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting to order. Can we have a determination of quorum, please?
Jim Barnes.
Here.
Michael Flick.
Here.
Linda Kennedy.
Here.
Dan Lazareski.
Here.
Kate Nelson.
Here.
Amy Owens could not make it tonight. She does have an excused absence. Rob Pierce.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. Will you all please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we have the ethics law announcements, please?
Commissioners are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the Commission today, number 1, you've received a gift or loan. Number 2, you have a pecuniary interest. Number 3, you have a commitment in a private capacity such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship. Or number 4, if you've provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered here tonight, please remember to disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And further, please remember to abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Commissioners are also reminded that under the Planning Commission rules, if you've had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the Commission today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting. I'm also going to go ahead and read the Zoom instructions. This meeting is being held in the County Commission chambers and also via Zoom. To attend the meeting via Zoom, you can log into the Zoom webinar using the link found on the first page of the agenda. You can also join the meeting by typing zoom.us into your computer, clicking Join a Meeting on the Zoom website, and enter meeting ID 842-7265-9406. Alternatively, if you have any computer issues, you can also join the meeting via telephone only by dialing 1-669-900-9128 and enter meeting ID 842-7265-9406 and pressing pound. For those wishing to provide public comment via Zoom, you can utilize the raise hand feature during any public comment period. To provide public comment via telephone only, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Could the appeal procedure, please, Mr. Floyd?
Yeah, most decisions rendered by the Planning Commission are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Planning Commission and qualify as an aggrieved person or party, you may appeal in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Planning Commission, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-3610 for information on the appeal procedure and application fee.
Thank you. This time I'd like to open up general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
There is no general public comment in chambers or via Zoom.
Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll move on to item number 6, approval of today's February 4th agenda. There is no changes that I'm aware of. So can I get a motion to approve as written? So moved. Mr. Flick, so moved. Linda seconds it. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Okay. Moving on to item number 7, approval of December 3rd Planning Commissioner meeting minutes. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to read that. Do we have any changes at this time, or can I get a motion to accept as written?
I move that it's accepted as written.
Commissioner Lazareski, I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. All right. Then we're moving on to the December 3rd. Gosh, dang it. I'm sorry. Let me just start over here. Moving on to the January 7th draft minutes. I assume everybody had a chance to look at those. Do we have any changes or anything, or can I get a motion to accept as written?
I move they are accepted as written.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Lazarevsky, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 8, public hearing. This one is abandonment case number WAB 24-0011, Bonka abandonment. I'm sorry. Mr. Lloyd, would you please announce?
Yeah, for hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an abandonment of Washoe County's interest in 33-foot wide government patent access easements along all property lines for parcel APN 142-242-16. And representing Washoe County in this matter is Senior Planner Eric Young.
All right, Eric, floor's yours, buddy.
Good evening, Chair, Commission. I'm Eric Young, Senior Planner, Washoe County Planning. This is, as Trevor mentioned, abandonment case number AB 240011 for the Bonka. How do we go forward?
Eric, do you want to turn it on the side? No, your clicker.
Controller on the side, it'll be either red or green. It needs to be green. There you go.
This parcel is located in some of the government home site parcels, as they're known, north of Mount Rose Highway or State Road 431, south of Arrow Creek. There is a county park there, Whites Creek Park. This parcel is located just north of there. I can put the pointer on it for everybody in the audience. Right here is the parcel. Just a little bit, a few blocks to the east is the Rayleighs that sits on Wedge and Mount Rose Highway, so we're really close to that location. Maybe help you a little bit more as a graphic depiction. There is Whites Creek Park, Mount Rose Highway there to the south, and the subject parcel indicated in blue right there with Whites Creek running through the northwest corner of the parcel. So the parcel is 2.5 acres in size. There's some split zoning on the parcel because of a variety of development constraints, including Whites Creek indicated here, and a minor fork of Whites Creek that forks off to the south there and actually goes across the southeast corner of the parcel. So there are some development constraints in that general area that result in the split zoning.
Excuse me, could you turn up the volume? I can barely hear you.
Am I on? Yeah, I can maybe just speak closer to the microphone. That'd work too. Sure.
I turned it up for you.
Okay. Sits in the Southwest Truckee Meadows planning area. All the neighboring parcels, and this is one of the important issues for all abandonments, all of the neighboring parcels currently have established access. So the request is to approve an abandonment of Washoe County's interest in the 33-foot wide government patent access easement along all the property lines of that particular parcel. I'm sure you're familiar somewhat with these 33-foot government patent access easements and with this process of abandoning Washoe County's interest only in that access easement. So that's a typical request, and that's what we're looking at this evening. Small-scale site plan, you can see I've got a couple of these that might help describe what's going on. Here's the existing structure in the house. You can see with the way that Washoe County does these does easements, if your easement is larger than 20 feet, if your access easement is larger than 20 feet, you have to measure your setback for any building on the parcel from the easement line and not from the parcel line. So in this case, if you start to measure the setback from the easement line, the setback's 30 feet in this particular zoning. you end up with a setback of 63 feet all the way around the property. I think this is a typical part of the presentation on these particular abandonment requests, because that 66 feet on all four sides can be an impediment to the normal development of the parcel. Here's another depiction of the same thing, just an aerial photo. You can see their existing access right there in the southeast corner where they come into the parcel. Access for the other surrounding parcels to the north, the northeast, and the east are there in the northeast corner. And in fact, the parcel on the east has additional access further to the east. The parcels to the west all have access coming in from the west. We can go back here. You can see the creek running through the north west portion of the parcel. And you can't quite tell it as well, but there is that branch of the creek running through the southeast portion of the parcel as well. These are some of those development constraints on the parcel. Here's just a graphic depiction of the 33-foot easement they're asking to abandon. And a basic evaluation of this request. We've talked through most of these. They're requesting to abandon Washoe County's portion of the access of the 33-foot patent easement. These easements are only on their property. They're not asking for abandonment adjacent to anyone else's property or running along anyone else's property. They're created through that government patent process, and they exist throughout all that general area, wherever these government home sites exist. We talked about how setbacks are measured and how this abandonment will change, how they have to measure the setback to make it like any other parcel in that typical zoning district. The important thing here that staff looks at when we're reviewing any of these requests is how will this impact neighboring properties? Where is the access for everybody else? Are you impacting access to anybody else? And if somebody in the future comes in who's similarly situated and asks for something similar, would we treat them in a similar way? And the answer to all of that in this case is that everybody has existing and sufficient access, and that if any of those properties situated in a similar way wanted to ask for the same thing, we would approach it in exactly the same fashion. So the easements subject to this amendment are not needed to support any access to any of the surrounding properties. They all have separate legal adequate access after these 33-foot easements are abandoned. And also importantly, that the public utility easements will be retained. And the engineering department has provided conditions that address the retention of public utility easements. So this is really only about the access easement portion, because it's that language of access easement that impacts how we measure those setbacks. And that's what will provide these property owners with that relief to measure their setbacks in the normal way people in that zoning district do. We sent this out to 9 different agencies. We heard back from 2, our own engineering department and Truckee Meadows Water Authority. Truckee Meadows Water does have actually some infrastructure that goes along that property. So they were, concerned about the maintenance of the public utility easements. When we discussed with them what our conditions would be relative to having to maintain those public access easements, they were satisfied that their conditions would be reflected in our conditions. So there are findings for these, like everything we do. In staff's review, We feel like these can be met, so we're offering these for your consideration. Feel like the master plan amendment does not affect any of the standards of the master plan. There's no detriment to any of the neighboring properties, and the public utility easements have to be maintained. So we feel like these findings can be satisfied, and so therefore we're going to offer to you a recommendation of approval for this abandonment. And here's a motion for your consideration if you agree. So that's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation that they'd like to make, or comments or anything, or? No? Okay. Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Young before we go to public comment? Okay. All right. At this time, thank you, Eric. At this time, we'd like to open up public comment.
I have no public comment in chambers. I have no public comment on Zoom.
Okay. We'll bring it back to the board for discussion or questions. Does anybody have any questions or discussion? If nothing, can I get a motion, please?
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission approve abandonment case number WAB 24-0011 with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all three findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.806.20.
Wonderful. Do we have a second? Second. Mr. Flick seconds it. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us on to 8B, which is another abandonment case. This one's number WAB 24-0012 for Wyatt. Mr. Lloyd, can you please announce that one?
Yeah, for hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an abandonment of Washoe County's interest in a 15-foot wide drainage easement, approximately 320 feet in length, that bisects the parcel and runs under the existing single-family dwelling. Representing Washoe County in this matter is Senior Planner Courtney Weike.
All right, Courtney, floor is yours. It was on.
Feel like it, does it?
Oh, there we go. Now it's on.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Courtney Weike, Senior Planner, Washoe County. The item before you, as Mr. Lloyd stated, is a request for an abandonment with record number WAB 24-0012 for Wyatt. The parcel is located at 4189 Plateau Court and is approximately 2.5 acres in size and has a regulatory zone of low-density suburban and is located within the Southwest Truckee Meadows planning area. The request before you today is to abandon a 15-foot wide drainage easement that is approximately 320 feet in length. The easement does bisect the subject parcel as well as an existing single-family dwelling. Just for a little bit of background, the single-family dwelling was permitted in 2005. Staff did confirm that the easement was not identified on the plans at that time. The requested abandonment would bring the existing residence into conformance with all the required setbacks and for the setbacks to any of the easements located on the parcel. No direct material changes would occur to the site as a result of the abandonment. The property owner may choose to remodel or expand the single-family dwelling in the future, and any improvements would be subject to the county code requirements for such. Engineering did confirm that the remaining easement to the east will continue to provide the appropriate drainage flow, and the easement requested for abandonment eliminated that, the easement requested for abandonment has already been regraded such that it is no longer necessary to be in place. All abutting property owners were properly noticed. We did receive one email asking for clarifying questions, and after providing the application and a link to the staff report, I heard nothing more from this person, so there was no concerns or comments in opposition. Applicable agencies and county departments reviewed the application, and their comments are included within the staff report. All agencies and/or county departments with conditions of approval were included in the exhibit for the conditions of approval. Staff doesn't believe that we can make all the required findings as explained in more detail within the staff report. And I have provided a possible motion for your consideration if you agree. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions. I am not sure if the applicant is in the room or on online.
Okay. Does the applicant wish to make comments or a presentation? Does you see him? No? Okay. Sounds like they're not. All right. Is there any questions for Courtney, the planner, on this?
I guess I have a comment. Since the county allowed a building on top of this easement in the past, has any change been made to the county processes to prevent this from continuing to happen? And if so, could that be added to the processes within your department?
If I may, this is a and through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner Kennedy. This is a very unique situation. We don't typically see easements running through the middle of a property. I would say there are certainly protections in place moving forward for such an event. Typically what you would find is such an easement would be located on the perimeter of a property, not in the middle of it. And so I had an opportunity to review the plans prior to this meeting, and they were not shown on the set of building plans. Also, it would be very difficult to find the recorded document that showed this easement. It would likely take a title search in order to find the easement. And so it would not be something that would typically be on the radar of the reviewers when the set of plans came forward. But to answer your question, yeah, there are certainly protections in place moving forward to prevent something similar to this in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, let's open up public comment on this matter.
I have no public comment in chambers. I have no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, once again, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other questions or discussion? If we don't have any, then I'll accept the motion.
Commissioner Lazareski, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission approve abandonment case number WAB 24-0012 for Joseph and Fran Wyatt Family Trust, with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all three findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code Section 110.806.20.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Brings us on to 8C, Development Code Amendment Case Number WDCA 24-0007 for Article 610 Final Subdivision Maps. Mr. Lloyd, would you please, oh, never mind, announce. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please bear with me. It's a little bit lengthy, this description. For hearing, discussion, and possible action to initiate an amendment to Washoe County Code, Chapter 110, Article 610, the final subdivision maps, to modify various sections in order to clarify requirements related to final subdivision maps. These amendments include requiring each final map submission to contain a minimum of 5 lots, and specifying what types of parcels count toward the 5-lot minimum, updating language to ensure compliance with the Nevada revised statutes, adding the requirement for a water supplier certificate on the final map when served by a general improvement district, providing that an acceptable financial assurance document may be utilized in lieu of a faithful performance bond, increasing the number of days for the initial final map submittal from 60 to 120 days prior to the final date to present the map to the Director of Planning and Building for signature. Removing the requirements for a phasing plan, further clarifying the timing requirements for the presentation date for the first final map and all successive final maps, and updating the names or titles of public officers and agencies, as well as the names of titles of certain reports and studies, and all matters necessarily connected therewith and pertaining thereto. If the proposed amendments are initiated, the Planning Commission may recommend approval of the proposed ordinance as submitted, recommend approval with modifications based on input and discussion at the public hearing, or deny the amendments. If approval is recommended, the Planning Commission is asked to authorize the chair to sign a resolution to that effect.
Wonderful,
and I will be
you.
presenting this,
okay.
this item.
Floor is yours.
All right. There it is. I'll try not to lose the batteries in the back. This item before you tonight is a cleanup of a part of our code that is really long overdue. The last amendment to the final subdivision map section was in 2010, and at that point it was really a minor amendment. So really these provisions of code have been in place since the early to mid 1990s. As you may have read in the ordinance, Article 610 is very technical. And unlike Article 608, tentative subdivision maps really doesn't involve community engagement or involvement. It's really on the back end after a tentative map has been approved. This is essentially the final, or this represents the final review stage before a subdivision map is finalized and recorded. We worked very closely with our colleagues in the engineering division, as well as our legal representative from the DA's office. And I would just, if I could, go quickly through the highlights. Some of the highlights of these draft amendments include a minimum of 5 lots for each final map, adding a requirement for a water supplier certificate to the final Mylar, increasing from 60 to 120 days the submission of a final map, clarifying the timing requirements for the presentation of the final map, and various cleanups and corrections throughout Article 610. So I'll walk just briefly through each of those. The first amendment that we highlighted was adding a minimum number of lots. Currently, quite frankly, this came as a surprise to many that we currently do not have a minimum number of lots required to record a final map. However, this will make it consistent with the tentative subdivision map, which does require a minimum of 5 lots. So we are asking that we adopt the change to allow a requirement for 5 lots. Also, adding some language that would prohibit ancillary lots as being counted towards that 5-lot minimum, meaning certain common areas or roadway utility lots or other similar type of parcels would not be included towards that 5-lot minimum. All right, the second request is to add a certificate for a water supplier that would only be required when the water supplier is a general improvement district. This mirrors the requirements of Nevada revised statutes. The third change would be to increase the number of days for submission of a final map from 60 days to 120 days. We find that 60 days is, quite frankly, insufficient for the review, correction. Oftentimes it takes multiple corrections in order to comply with the code and all of the conditions. And quite frankly, it's consistent with current practice. You know, the development community is quite aware of the length of time that it takes to complete review and record a map. This, however, was one of the issues that was raised by some of the development community as a concern. However, I think it was a misunderstanding. They were thinking this was 120 days for review of a tentative map. That's not the case. It's for a final map only. All right. The next change, and this is one of our bigger changes, and quite frankly, the reason really that we're bringing this forward, and this really is to provide more clarity and definition to what we call as the presentation date. And that comes right out of state law. State law has some, I would say, some rather confusing language as to what does that mean as to present. And so we've defined that as the date that a final map is submitted for presentation to the Director of Planning and Building. And that's important because that's the very last signature on the final map Mylar. And so there was some confusion previously in terms of the state law that presenting a final map just simply means we're providing the submission packet. That really isn't the case. The intent was that it would be the final signature date prior to the recordation of the final map. So this will go a long way in terms of clearing up some of the confusion that we have had in the past. Also, we've had a number of cleanups throughout Article 610. There's been a number of agency change names over the years, titles of certain officers and officials that have been corrected, as well as there's a name of reports that are more appropriate or have changed over the years, so those have been corrected. We have, as part of this proposed ordinance, we're removing the requirement for a phasing plan. The purpose of that is, quite frankly, a final map really is a phase of a tentative map. So it's really inappropriate to require a phasing of a phase, and that's why we're removing that requirement. Also, again, as I discussed, changes to avoid the confusion regarding the term present. And we're also adding the language to allow for financial assurance documents in lieu of a performance bond. Very often, people utilize the term bonding, but that may involve several different means of providing a financial assurance. Some of those options may include providing us with a certificate of deposit, a money order, a cashier's check. So there's multiple means of financial assurance rather than just a performance bond. There was a community meeting held on December 18th. There was a total of 31 attendees. Some of the concerns, as we discussed, the changing of the date from 60 days to 120 days for the date of submission. I think there was just some confusion in what that meant. Once we discussed it, it seemed like everybody seemed to be okay with that change. There was some concerns about the consistency with Articles 424 and 608. However, as we identified those, really it still is consistent with those articles. Also, there was a concern with one of our original proposals, and that was to remove the 10-foot setback from fault lines. We have eliminated that proposal, so that is no longer a consideration with this proposed set of changes. So staff feels we can make all of the required findings for this commission to approve this code amendment, and I offer the following motion for your consideration. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions if you have them.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lloyd?
Yeah, and I do too.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Flick. Yeah.
What is your normal turnaround time once you get a map submitted to staff? I know it depends on volume as well, but
boy, it's a tough question, and there's so many factors to take into consideration, and really has to do with the complexity of the proposed final map. It has to do with the quality of the submission also. You know, I'll probably look at my engineer to better answer that question, but I would say it's rare when the turnaround is less than 6 months.
Good evening, Janelle Thomas, Senior Licensed Engineer for the record. Yeah, it does depend on the quality of the submission, the completeness of the submission. Typically, what our process includes is approximately like 4 to 6 weeks to review that first submittal and provide comments back to the applicant. Once those comments are received by the applicant, those red lines or comments that need to be addressed are just back on their timeline as far as how quickly they can respond to those comments and edits that are required by the various reviewing departments. But I would say, in general, I think that 6 months is most likely a reasonable timeline to expect recordation of that final map.
As a follow-up, if I may, when does the 120 days start?
So the original submittal of the initial application for that final map, that needs to be 120 days prior to the expiration of the tentative map.
So they've received the corrections, and then the meter starts for the 120 days?
No. Their initial application needs to be submitted 120 days prior to the expiration, the anticipated expiration of the tentative map that final map is associated with.
All right, so you have a tentative map, you go through the process and get that approved. Then they want to work to finalize. So when, I'm still a little confused, when does the 120 days start? When that
initial final map application is submitted, that is the required time frame that we need to receive that application.
All right, so that's after the approval of the tentative map.
Yeah.
So you work backwards, right? So let's take a tentative map. If a tentative map is approved, a developer then has 4 years in order to complete what they need before the map expires.
Okay.
So think about the map expiration date. The 120 days, the applicant must submit that final map submission a minimum of 120 days prior to the map expiring, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Linda.
Yes, I have a question about section 110.61035, provision of CATV. I'm surprised we're still requiring cable TV.
That's correct, we are. I understand what you're saying, but they
has
still
any
operate in this.
consideration been made to update the technology requirements?
That is a possibility. Again, they still operate within the community.
Yeah.
And it was, quite frankly, something we weren't tackling with the set of changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's something to be considered in the future?
It is, absolutely.
Okay.
I got it. Trevor, this is Rob. I got a question. So let's say a developer gets an RZA approved. How long do they have before they have to turn in a tentative map?
For an RZA, a regular?
Well, just let's say they want to build a bunch of houses in a certain area and they get it approved. It goes through the county commissioner and all that. It's all approved. How many days do they have before they have to turn in a tentative map? Is there a time frame?
There is no time frame. No.
Okay.
So you change your zoning.
Yeah.
Basically, that zoning now has changed and
Right.
in perpetuity.
So they've got forever. But once they turn in that tentative map, then before that expires, they have to turn in this final map, and
Yes.
that's what we're talking about, is the final
That's
map.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, any other questions before we go to public comment? Okay, let's open up public comment. Thank you, Trevor.
I have no public comment in chambers and I have no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, bring it back to the board. Any more questions, comments, discussion? If not, well, let's open it up for a motion.
I move that giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission initiate amendments to the Washoe County Development Code and recommend approval of WDCA 24-0007 to amend Washoe County Code Chapter 110, Article 610, Final Subdivision Maps, as reflected within the proposed ordinance contained in Exhibit A1. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Exhibit A on behalf of the Washoe County Planning Commission and to direct staff to present a report to this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. The recommendation for approval is based on the ability to make all of the 4 findings set forth in Washoe County Code Section 110.818.15E.
Okay, this is Rob. I'll second that. So we have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us on to 8D, Development Code Amendment Case Number WDCA 25-0001 for a housing package 2.5A. Mr. Lloyd, can you please announce that if you are back in your seat? Okay.
Will do. All right. For hearing, discussion, and possible action to initiate an amendment to the Washoe County Code at Chapter 110 by adding and amending various sections in Division 3, Regulation of Uses, Division 4, Development Standards, and Division 9, General Provisions. These updates include adding various sections to establish minimum standards. Sorry, my page just got out of order. Bear with me. Thank you. All right. To establish minimum standards for alleyways. These, these updates also include amending various sections to update the table of uses for residential use types to include middle housing, minor accessory dwelling units, guest quarters, multifamily, minor, and employee housing, modify allowances in the table of for duplexes and multifamily housing within regulatory zones in which those use types are already allowed, and reorganize that table. Update the residential use types list to add and define multifamily minor, the middle housing use types of triplex, quadplex, and cottage court, guest quarters, and employee housing, and reorganize the list. Update detached accessory structure regulations to reference lot coverage standards rather than enumerate them, and to modify deed restriction requirements for connection to water and wastewater facilities. Modify attached and detached accessory dwelling unit standards to regulate their use on parcels with middle housing types and specify their mutual exclusivity with guest quarters. Modify Table 110-406-051 governing regulatory zone development standards to consolidate the separate tables into one table, and to make modifications to minimum lot sizes, setbacks, and minimum lot widths for certain regulatory zones. Modify the notes in Table 110-406-051 to add middle housing and to clarify density for single-family attached. Modify common open space development standards to clarify that detention ponds and drainage facilities cannot be included in common open space. Modify off-street parking requirements to add standards for the new housing types, and modify the requirements for duplexes. Modify landscaping exemptions to include middle housing types. Modify residential common open space standards to add dog parks and pocket parks as permissible types for open space, and require common open space for all multifamily developments with 5 or more units. and add or amend various definitions and all matters necessarily connected therewith and pertaining thereto. If the proposed amendments are initiated, the Planning Commission may recommend approval of the proposed ordinance as submitted, recommend approval with modifications based on input and the discussion at the public hearing, or recommend denial. If approval is recommended, the Planning Commission is asked to authorize the chair to sign a resolution to that effect.
That's a mouthful.
Chair, as you can see, this is going to be, there's a lot here. So I wasn't going to run the 15-minute timer for this presentation. Most likely it's going to go over.
Give him an extra second. Whatever he needs,
Okay.
that's fine.
And representing Washoe County is Senior Planner Chris Bronzik.
Thank you. So we're looking at WDCA 25-0001. This is Housing Package 2.5A. So there's some procedural background associated with this. So first, why are we back at the Planning Commission? So there was minor changes to the Development Code Amendment that resulted in us bringing it back for best practice purposes. Additionally, during the first reading at the Board of County Commissioners, there was concerns related to noticing of the citizen advisory boards. So in 2021, the CABs were previously responsible for development review, but dissolved in August of 2021. The neighborhood meeting process was established as a new pre-application process due to the dissolution of the CABs. The CABs were then recreated under the same name, but without development review responsibilities. There's still references within code to the old CABs that created uncertainty with noticing requirements. As bringing this package to the Planning Commission, CABs were noticed as courtesy as part of this process. So what do these amendments not do? So they do not allow apartment complexes throughout Washoe County. They do not increase the number of houses that can be built in residential areas. They do not change the zoning of any property, and they do not propose any development projects. So with this process, it's part of the strategic and long-range planning process within Washoe County. The Washoe County Strategic Plan identifies expanding appropriate housing options across the community by creating incentives and streamlining the planning and permitting process. Additionally, within Envision Washoe 2040, Washoe County's new master plan, one of the priority items is to allow for more flexibility in the zoning to enable more housing types. And that's within the Population and Housing Policy 3.1. So some background. So as mentioned, housing affordability and attainability are identified in Washoe County Envision Washoe 2040 as a priority. It's also identified as a priority item by Washoe County Board of County Commissioners. So since 2010, we've seen a 145% increase in median home value between 2010 and 2022, but only a 58% increase in median household income. So attainability of homes has far exceeded what the income has kept up with. As of today, there are 6,840 dwelling units needed within unincorporated Washoe County to support the population increase estimations through 2042. Additionally, the Truckee Meadows Regional Strategy for Housing Affordability identifies a need for 7,350 affordable dwelling units. So additionally, the National Association of Home Builders Housing Opportunity Index showed that in the first quarter of 2014, there was a 65% of people that could afford a median-priced home within our region. And in the third quarter of 2023, only 17.5% could. So a little bit of an overview on what missing middle housing is. So In general, it is a range of house-scaled buildings with multiple units that are compatible in scale with detached single-family housing. So the image above, on the left end of that image, is largely what we're talking about with this package. And all the new uses that are proposed are would be allowed within suburban areas of Washoe County and urban areas. So let's talk about density. So one of the repeating themes that we've heard from the public is concerns related to density. And so I want to make it clear that housing types must comply with the underlying density, period. And the density is limited by regional plan designations. So using medium density suburban, which is the overwhelming majority of suburban regulatory zones within county, allows for 3 dwellings per acre for detached single-family homes. And it allows for 5 dwellings per acre for attached residential. So with this proposal, the density doesn't change. All that's now being allowed is they can still have 3 single-family, they can still have 5 attached single-family, or they can potentially have a duplex and triplex. So it just provides more housing variety. So this is our current table of uses. And so what we have done is we have reorganized the use table, we have added missing middle, and we have added guest homes and others. Again, no rezoning or development projects are part of these amendments. So this is what the new proposed use table looks like. As you can see, we are adding under family residential, multifamily minor, which would be allowed by right within the urban zones, as well as with a special use permit within the neighborhood commercial zone. We're also adding middle housing, and we've moved duplex from family residential down to the middle housing. In middle housing, you're seeing duplex, triplex, quadplex, and cottage court, which are all allowed within the urban regulatory zones, the neighborhood commercial regulatory zones, and high-density suburban. They will all require an administrative review within the medium-density suburban regulatory zones, and duplex and cottage court would be allowed within the low-density suburban with the approval of an administrative permit before the Board of Adjustment. Additionally, we are adding minor accessory dwelling to the use table. That is a use that is already allowed within code. We're just trying to add clarity. Additionally, we are adding the guest quarters use type, which I'll touch up on in a further slide. And this one just highlights how we are adding employee housing. This use type has been allowed within the high desert area for some time. We are adding regulations associated to it, and we are allowing it to be within commercial regulatory zones with the approval of a special use permit. So what are some of the changes? So we are updating to establish regulations for newly defined housing types. We're updating the parking, landscaping requirements. We're also updating common open space standards as well as the definitions, all which definitions are also normal for this type of thing. So Article 306 was one of the updates that we did. This adds the guest quarters, which is a semi-separate habitation without a kitchen. And this one's an important one because throughout our previous housing packages, this was one of the use types that was consistently brought up by the public as a need within the county. And so staff listened, and staff worked with the agencies to make this a reality. So Article 313 is a new article within Washoe County Development Code, and a couple of the use types proposed have more complex requirements associated with them. We established Article 313 to regulate those use types. Those are cottage court and employee housing. Cottage courts, the standards proposed are aimed to create a community feel and have to do things with common open space, site orientation standards, and maximum square footage. Employee housing was the other use type that we added to this. The regulations proposed are to ensure that it is well managed and to have appropriate facilities. So essential facilities such as kitchens and bathrooms, as well as having on-site property managers. Article 406 is building placement standards. This governs setbacks, lot width, lot area, height, and dwelling units per acre. So as you can see within the staff report and within the ordinance, we are proposing to reduce lot widths from MDS, HDS, and all urban regulatory zones. And we're also proposing to align the minimum lot area with all urban regulatory zones. Additionally, there are 6 tables currently within the development code. This proposal would consolidate those 6 tables into one easy-to-read table. So when we were drafting package 2.5A, we conducted several public outreach meetings that had great attendance. We also had people respond to the neighborhood meeting hub survey. In general, people were opposed to the proposed amendments. However, they did bring up several specific concerns, which we aim to address on the next slides. So some of those concerns were the height limit removal within certain areas of the county, infrastructure, concerns regarding densities and apartments in rural areas, and the overall size of package 2.5A. And our response was to remove articles 208, 214, 216, 310, and 401 from this package. Those articles removed changes to maximum height in certain planning areas and resulted in an overall reduction of the size of the package. Again, I'll hit up on that. The densities are subject to the underlying regulatory zone, and apartments would still not be allowed. Multifamily would still not be allowed within rural regulatory zones. Infrastructure concerns we heard at all the public outreach meetings, and we did take them seriously. We reached out to various agencies that regulate the infrastructure within our region, and there were no concerns because the infrastructure build out is based off of the current densities that are master planned, and again, no densities are increased. We also made several other changes to the draft ordinance based on the public outreach that are listed on this slide. We received, ultimately we did receive valuable input that ultimately resulted in a better ordinance. So these are some of the changes that resulted since WDCA 240004, which is the previous amendment that was heard by the Planning Commission. So we did make a number of minor changes to the ordinance that resulted in, they're technical in nature and intended to increase the clarity of the ordinance. And so I'm going to actually go through each one of these. So the first one, we went through the guest quarters definition. It has been modified to require a bedroom and a bathroom rather than bedroom or bathroom. Guest quarters regulations have been modified to specify maximum square footage allowances for parcels with duplexes, triplexes, or quadplexes, mirroring regulations for accessory dwelling units. Definition of employee housing has been modified to more clearly state that employee housing is provided as a benefit of employment rather than for compensation. An additional code standard for employee housing has been added to require a deed restriction be recorded to limit use of the housing as employee housing. An employee housing code standard has been modified to provide a process to determine the common living and recreation space amenities required when there is no special use permit required. So this is specific to the high desert planning area modifiers. There's been a number of typos within the code amendment, so we have changed and fixed those. Various definitions in Article 902 have been further modified, and various grammatical and typos have been made to provide consistent punctuation and clarity within the code. So, findings. So, one must make one of the following findings to recommend approval for this development code amendment. First is consistency with the master plan. As highlighted in the staff report, the DCA is a direct implementation of the master plan, which specifically directs us to increase the variety of housing within Washoe County. The second one is to promote the purpose of the development code, part of which is to promote public health and safety, which is furthered by housing affordability. The third possible finding is that the DCA responds to changes in conditions. In this case, the change condition is the dramatic decrease in housing attainability that we described at the beginning of this presentation. The fourth possible finding is that the development code amendment not adversely affect the implementation of the conservation and population elements of the master plan, or Envision Washoe 2040. This DCA is a direct implementation of that master plan. As mentioned, only one of these findings would need to be made, and staff is confident that all four can be made. Staff is recommending approval, and we've provided a motion in front of you, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Additionally, Senior Planner Kat Oakley is also available. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody have any questions before we go into public comment?
I do.
Okay.
First of all, your regulatory zone development standards on page 28 are a big improvement. It's a lot easier to understand. But I did notice that you increased the minimum lot width in medium-density suburban and medium-density suburban 4, high-density suburban, low-density urban, medium-density urban, high-density urban. You also changed the minimum lot size significantly for medium-density urban from 3,700 square feet to, it was 8,000, now it's 3,700, and the same thing for high-density urban. My question is, if the density doesn't change, why do you have to change the lot size?
So the lot size for medium-density urban and high-density urban are currently being proposed to be in alignment with low-density urban, which is currently 3,700 square feet. Additionally, just because the lot size and lot width is being reduced does not require developers or homeowners or property owners to have that lot size. So if they wanted to have a use type on MDU, medium-density urban, or low-density urban, it doesn't have to be 3,700 square feet. It can be 10 acres, it can be 20 acres. This just provides flexibility for different housing types and different development proposals.
But my question is, why do you want smaller width sizes of property if your density isn't going to increase?
Kat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. So as you've pointed out, the density stays the same, right? And really a lot of what the new housing types proposed are getting at is opportunities where you can put maybe more than one residential unit on a parcel. But what has been identified in terms of middle housing and barriers to the development of that middle housing is that having minimum lot sizes or minimum lot widths that are too restrictive can make it difficult to develop sites that might be limited in other ways with existing infrastructure or surrounding development, or just providing the opportunity to configure lots in a way that reduces the infrastructure cost and the infrastructure ultimately that, the developers develop, but that we as Washoe County may maintain. And so the idea of this is that by providing that flexibility, you can make sure that we're not artificially or unnecessarily inflating the cost of infrastructure and things like that that ultimately do end up in the cost of the parcels and the housing units that people buy, and then have the impact of increasing the cost of housing. So that's why we recommend these changes and why it's important to have those when you are wanting to look at having different types of housing being developed.
My issue with this is you're decreasing lot sizes, which is going to give the developers a chance to make more money with the property they own. I don't see that it helps the public one bit.
The developers still will not be able to develop and sell any more units than they could currently develop and sell. So it's, and smaller lots in general also, the less land you have to buy a home or to buy a duplex, whatever you're buying, the less money you have to spend on that land. And so in terms of developers, making more money from it, the number of units they can develop is going to remain the same, regardless of what the lot size configuration ends up being.
Then why are you, I don't, and then you're also decreasing the yards of setbacks in half of what they are now. You're making all these changes to make the lots smaller. And I think that's not good for the community. So that's just my thought.
If I could, a follow-up to that. Kat, do we have very much low-density, medium-density, and high-density urban land within the county that's not in city jurisdiction?
Cat Oakley, Washoe County Planning, we have very little. We have absolutely no high-density urban, a few parcels of medium-density urban, and a few of low.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions before we go to public comment? Okay, at this time I'd like to open up public comment.
In chambers, I have Pat Davison, followed by Matthew Shooter.
Good evening, Chair Pierce, members of the Commission. My name is Pat Davison. Thank you for this opportunity to offer some thoughts on the updated Housing Package 2.5A, focused on filling the missing middle gap with a variety of housing types that conform to existing density. It was a smart move to explain the confusion regarding cab noticing and why that was not done in 2024. However, I do think it is also a smart move to notice the cabs every time there are development code changes. Even better, make the rounds of the cabs in person. I say that because the county admin staff attending the cab meetings usually are not aware of the changes when asked. Simply put, the reach of the cabs is another way to inform residents. My goal is always one of no surprises. If there is a misunderstanding or opposition, get it out on the table at an early stage to determine how to best address it where possible. Overall, I like the cleanup changes. I agree that staff has made the definitions and clarifications more clear and focused, while regulatory details are organized and accessible. The change takes the generic and makes it explicit, a beneficial change for the public and probably for you as decision makers too. My favorite part of the revised package is the master table. That's a thing of beauty. Well done to staff. A note about the names we are introducing into the county's vocabulary. Guest quarters came about from public comment last year, and triplex and quadplex were previously allowed where the acreage and zoning for attached units permitted them. Now we are giving those attached units a more precise name, even though they were allowed before. And it is reassuring to me that we are not talking about downzoning those parcels which allow 3 or more units like triplexes and quadplexes. I'm glad we're respecting the private property rights of those owners. As best as I can tell, annual housing growth is slower than population growth. We have been playing catch up and likely will for years to come. Even with these changes, we will be waiting for developers and owners who want to build these smaller, more economically attainable units to come forward. Remember, this package of changes is for housing that will be found on the market rate side of the spectrum, not for deed-restricted or federally funded subsidized housing. The goal is to generate additional housing that looks different than detached, larger single-family homes with high price tags. The staff report explains how the 4 findings comply with the legal and policy framework found in code. Staff recommends you make all 4 findings, as do I. Added to that, there is plenty of anecdotal evidence lending credibility to one of the findings, response to change conditions. You don't have to look far for that. In closing, I respectfully request that you support this needed effort to diversify our housing stock to meet the demand for more attainable housing in our market rate environment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Matthew Shooter, followed by Melody Shooter, representing Citizens for Spanish Springs.
Commissioners, Matthew Shooter for the record. I'm going to make a few comments on behalf of Citizens for Spanish Springs, and then I'll delineate where my personal comments begin. So beginning with Citizens for Spanish Springs, the latest recycled planning proposals have a goal of increasing so-called affordable housing, but they do not properly layer these homes in graduated use rings. They arbitrarily declare that multifamily is somehow compatible with single family and intermingle these two types as a matter of newly declared right. It's not buildings and paint I'm talking about. Single-family homeowners are not necessarily the same as multifamily homeowners. Home dwellers, rather, in commitment to a neighborhood, in their priorities, demands on government services, or the taxes they pay to support those services. So we can't just say they are compatible. There.gov said it, and now it is so. I am personally here because I do not want these changes at all. I do not want rentals or low-income housing intermingled with single-family homes, especially high-value properties people have literally worked their lives to afford with the expectation their equity would be protected by zoning, only to have the meaning of the zoning corrupted by such game playing as declaring commercial use would be broadly defined to include not only necessary convenience stores, but huge warehouses and now higher density housing. The use of obvious wordsmithing techniques, such as the phrase missing middle, disgust me. The absence of the missing middle is a good thing. It signifies that people can afford their own detached homes. They're owners, not renters. They have a source of stored wealth, not a pile of receipts to show for their hard work. The missing middle is the difference between Europe with its landlocked tiers of wealth and America with its historically abundant opportunities to turn hard work into dreams. The solution to housing affordability is better education, better training, better jobs, not downgraded hopes. The county's bloated inefficient, including $3.2 million a year net expense to subsidize a golf course. It's digging its own financial hole by encouraging more unchecked growth. And it seeks to solve this problem by getting a bigger shovel rather than controlling its ravenous appetite. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melody Shooter, followed by T.R. Ronderley.
Melody Cello for the record. I'm representing myself as well as the Citizens for Spanish Springs community. The latest planning version is self-described as minor trivial changes to the last plan we strenuously objected to, with no fundamental recognition of the concerns of the existing community has about continuous incompatibility uses. This plan is flawed, implemented of a flawed goal to increase the amount of affordable housing, i.e. lower quality housing, mostly for people who don't live here yet. Big government created the shortage by crowding out the supply of privately owned land. Now county government offers us a solution: multifamily homes, non-zoning, no buffers, but all according to its master plan, which is supposed to make this mess acceptable. If government did nothing, home values would rise as the demand increases and the market would sort out the problem, limiting overdevelopment. Affordable means lower price, often meaning you don't own anything but rent. You pay a slightly lower rent than mortgage, but you end up with no equity. Just a bunch of receipt when it comes time to move or retire. The landlord captures your equity as profit. How is that a good social policy to pursue? The county uses misleading, deceptive language in its planning document. It says that there is no increase in density compared to current regulation. What the county really means is there is no increase in theoretically maximum density, and there will be an increase in actual built density because some plots will now have multifamily homes, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, whatever, under the new zoning regulations rather than only single-family homes as they would have had before. This is because multifamily will be permitted to intermingle by right with single-family rather than having to go through the pesky process of getting the new neighborhood to review and comment. In previous years, there was a citizens advisory board for citizens to have to say in the zoning of the neighborhood, a means to prevent unwanted overdevelopment. Now the CAB have been neutered. The citizens are back in their place with a 3-minute opportunity to object, a formality during the County Planning Commission can nod and ignore the county commissioners and can tell them to not repeat the same valid objection which others have because listening to upset the citizens is apparently boring. The effective response is to have to remember and vote, and I promise we will vote. I've got thousands of people.
Thank you.
Lastly, in chambers, we have T.R. Rondule. If you would please state your first and last name for the record.
Hello. Thank you for hearing me again. Remember me? 6 months ago, I asked you to hold that thought as I stood before you like this.
Can you please state your name for the record, ma'am?
T.R. Rondule.
Thank you.
Back then, I had referenced a quote that stated that I know I can't change any of your minds, but I still do have questions. And I ran out of time explaining why I was standing here like this. So if you recall that hold your thought, were any of you thinking perhaps, oh brother, now what? Or what's this going to be about? Or how about this person? She's trying to call down the wrath of God or perhaps rain? Well, actually, this is my amazement at each one of you and your ability to absorb the massive amount of information that comes before you in order to reach your decisions. That's why I'm amazed, because I've tried it for just this one single issue. Just this one. I've clicked on links, I've looked at definitions, and oh my gosh, I now understand what going down the rabbit hole means. So you guys are awesome. But the one thing that does not show up in any of that research is the reality. The reality that the citizens in Spanish Springs face. And it boils down to water. The more people you bring in, the more water you're going to need. I heard directly, face-to-face, from a Tumwa representative who said, you know who uses the most water? That high school up there. That business over there. Yeah, at the Tumwa meeting at Alice Taylor Elementary School. But do you know what else? That meeting wasn't required to have a recording. So there's one other citizen off of Verde Drive who heard that gentleman say that. That's all the proof that I have. But do you know, lawyers like gray areas, and they take little things like that and they can make them into really important aspects when it comes to the safe and secure and healthy community that you all say you're here to uphold. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so no further public comment in chambers. I do have one hand raised on Zoom. That will be, looks like someone at the Gerlach Community Center. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Russell Byerly for the record. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, Russell.
Wonderful. I am here to speak in favor of this measure. You know, unincorporated Washoe County is about the size of Connecticut. It goes all the way to the Oregon border, and there are a lot of people in a lot of isolated communities who really need these different types of housing to be available. There's a significant disparity between how much money you can make working in a place like Gerlach and how much a starter home goes for in this market. So thank you very much for your excellent work on these changes, and I hope you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like I have no further hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, so we have nobody else. Last chance, last call for anybody, public comment in chambers. We got one right over here. Come up, state your name, and then say what you're going to say, and then when you're done, go over and see them and fill out some papers.
Hi, my name is Jake Starr. I am speaking as a member of community in support of this measure. As a member of the community, I would rate myself probably in the lower income threshold, and I think that any kind of expanding housing opportunities or expansions of regulations for these medium-sized, or I forget the proper terminology, the missing middle situation is always going to be beneficial to us as members of the community who are maybe not as well off. I believe that these changes would only benefit not only the middle class and lower class people who are within the Spanish Springs area or looking to move in there, but it would also be a great market for speculators who would be looking to buy up these duplexes, triplexes, etc. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Just see them fill out some papers. So if we don't have any more public comment, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the board. Does anybody have any comments, discussion, or anything? You do? Mr. Flick, go ahead.
Kat, if I can borrow you again. I thought I understood it, but I'm a little confused now. On this 3,700 square feet, all right, if my thinking is correct, that would be the minimum lot size to develop one of these units, is that correct?
Cat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. So if somebody wanted to divide land or move the boundaries of land to change the size of that land, what we would say is you cannot go smaller than 3,700 square feet.
So if somebody was able to find a parcel that's 3,700 square feet and had all the amenities and what have you with it, they can build one unit. The cost of that land would be substantially less than, say, a property of 8,000 square feet.
That's, yeah, exactly.
And as a result, you should be able to sell that completed unit for less money than you would sell that same unit on an 8,000 square foot lot, and therefore provide more affordable housing, quote, whatever that means, than if you had the larger parcels. I certainly get larger parcels keeps the rural atmosphere, but it's not going to provide affordable housing.
Right, and I do just want to specify and clarify that those minimum lot size for medium density urban, high density urban, they are not in the rural area. They are in the suburban/urban areas of Washoe County. They're the urban zones, and so it would provide flexibility in those instances, but our rural areas, those minimum lot sizes and dimensions are remaining the same to get to your point of maintaining rural character.
But likewise, on the 8,000 square foot lot, you can build 2 units of similar, of the same kind that you did on the smaller lot.
Right, and for these particular zoning districts, medium density urban, high density urban, the densities are, you're looking at 21 units per acre, 42 units per acre. These zoning districts are really aimed at multifamily housing, like apartment type housing. Mm-hmm. That's what they historically have been used for in the county. And this measure, it's to provide the flexibility, the recommended change, but it's also just to have consistency in our urban zoning regulations.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to commend you guys. You did a great job on presenting this package, putting it all together, cleaning it up and all that. And I want to just remind the board that under the Washoe County Code Section 110.815.15E, we're only required to find one finding on this. We're not required to find all four, but if we do find one, then we're kind of obligated. So just wanted to remind you guys, it's on page 39 if you have any questions about that. Let's bring it back to the board. Any discussion, any final questions or anything like that? If not, I'll open it up for a motion.
Commissioner Lazareski, for discussion purposes, I'd just like to say I think the staff has done a tremendous job here without increasing any allowed density, just trying to create flexibility in land use for property owners, for folks who maybe have the space and would like to add an accessory dwelling unit or move to a duplex or a triplex on a parcel that would support that density without having to do a parcel split and all of that. Without modifying any height limits, without adding any allowed stories to buildings, without increasing any density at all, just creating the opportunity for folks to build in slightly different modes that hopefully will create some more units that will support our working families, our school teachers, our firefighters who are getting priced out by the run-up in housing prices.
I'd like to say something. The only part that I'm finding very uncomfortable with is the changing in the lot in the suburban densities, the suburban lots. I understand the changes in the urban, but I really have a problem with decreasing lot size in the suburban parts. I don't understand why we would want to do that in the suburban regulatory zones. That's what I have a real, I'm very uncomfortable with that.
I hear what you're saying. They haven't proposed to reduce any suburban minimum lot sizes. All they've proposed is to reduce the minimum lot width.
Yeah.
So basically, if you had a property, say, with a difficulty with a hill where you're only going to be able to build down along one side that's fronting the road, they could meet the minimum lot sizes and meet the allowed density with narrower lots that flag farther up the hill, so everybody had a steep backyard, but you could still fit the houses in.
Okay.
If there's not any further discussion,
I just want to reassure Linda that, ma'am, you can vote any way you wish.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever you feel comfortable with is what we want. So don't feel pressured. So go ahead.
Well, that makes sense. That makes more sense than what Kat said. Sorry, Kat, but that made sense to me.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission initiate amendments to the Washoe County Development Code and recommend approval of WDCA 25-0001 to amend Washoe County Code Chapter 110 within Articles 300, 302, 304, 306, 406, 408, 410, 412, 432, and 902, and add Article 313 as reflected within the proposed ordinance contained in Exhibit A1. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Exhibit A on behalf of the Washoe County Planning Commission and to direct staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. This recommendation for approval is based on the ability to make all four of the findings set forth in Washoe County Code Section 110.818.15E.
This is Rob, just for clarification. The recommendation for approval is based on ability to make at least one of the 4, right? Is that what you said?
I can make all 4.
I know, but I'm just reading it right off of here, so just for clarification, that's all. Okay.
Commissioner Nelson will second,
Okay.
and I can also make all 4 findings.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
We have 1 nay. Motion passes. Thank you. All right. That moves us on to item number 9, future agenda items. Anybody have anything that they would like for future agenda items? Okay. Move on to item B, request for information from staff. I have one request. Can we please get the recycle bins dumped? They haven't been dumped since October, November, and they're overflowing. That would be really nice. Does anybody else have any? No? Okay. Director of Legal Counsel.
The only thing I have to report on, you may remember the Empire MPA RZA that came before the commission not long ago is scheduled for the February 11th BCC meeting. That's all that I have.
Okay. Anything from legal?
Legal tonight, thank you.
All right, let's open up general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
I have no general public comment in chambers. I have no one on Zoom.
All right, with that, then it is 7:31, meeting adjourned.